Okay, Senator Beitman, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, this is Senate Joint Resolution number 2, Convention of States. It's a joint resolution requesting Congress to call for a convention of states to propose amendments to the United States Constitution under Article 5. Article 5 allows two options to amend the Constitution as needed. The most common one that everybody knows about is the method through Congress. The other one that's not necessarily known about as much and has never actually been used is to bypass Congress and go through the states. And the states have an incredible authority and power with Article 5 to bypass Congress in the case of what I would call a runaway Congress and a runaway federal government. And we'll get to that in a minute. I will go through the bill. Page 1, we have some findings. Whereas the founders of the Constitution of the United States empowered state legislatures to be guardians of liberty against future abuses of power by the federal government. And whereas the federal government has created a crushing national debt through improper and imprudent spending. Flipping over to page 2, whereas the federal government has invaded the legitimate roles of the states through the manipulative process of federal mandates, many of which are unfunded mandates. And whereas the federal government has ceased to operate under a proper interpretation of the Constitution of the United States. And whereas it is the solemn duty of the states to protect the liberty of our people, particularly for generations to come, by proposing amendments to the Constitution of the United States through a convention of the states under Article 5 for the purposes of restraining these and related abuses of power. If you'll pardon me, I'm still recovering from COVID, so I'm a little short of breath and it's kind of hard to breathe, so bear with me on that. At the bottom of page 2 is where the call happens. This is the important part. 15 other states have passed identical language to what we're about to read. And so hopefully Wyoming will be the next. This call is important. Section 1. Now therefore be it resolved by the members of the legislature of the state of Wyoming that the legislature of the state of Wyoming hereby applies to Congress under the provisions of Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States for the calling of a convention of the states limited to proposing amendments to the Constitution of the United States that impose fiscal restraints on the federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and limit the terms of office for its officials and for members of Congress. And it moves on to Section 2. The legislature of the state adopts the application under Section 1 of this joint resolution expressly subject and to the following reservations, understandings, and declarations. Number 1, an application to the Congress of the United States to call a convention of the states pursuant to Article 5 for this purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution confers no power to Congress other than the power to call the convention. The power of Congress to exercise this ministerial duty consists solely of the authority to name a reasonable time and place for the initial meeting of a convention. Number 2, Congress shall call an amendment convention of the states only upon the receipt of applications for an amendment convention for the substantially same purpose, this application, from 2/3 of the legislatures of the several states. And it goes on to limit Congress in number 3. Congress does not have the power or authority to determine any rules for the governing of an amendment convention of the states called pursuant to Article 5. We don't have the authority to set the number of delegates, nor does it have the power to name delegates to a convention. These are all important safeguards. Number 4, by definition, Convention of the States to propose amendments to the Constitution means that states shall vote on the basis of one state, one vote. Moving on to number 5, Convention of the States to propose amendments to the Constitution convened pursuant to this application shall be limited to the consideration of the topics specified in this joint resolution and no other. This application is made with the express understanding that an amendment in any way seeks to amend, modify, or repeal any provision of the Bill of Rights shall not be authorized for consideration. And it goes on to talk about the ratification process, number 6, whether it be through the legislatures of the several states or by special state ratification conventions. And number 7, the legislature may provide further instructions to its delegates and may recall its delegates at any time for a breach of duty or violation of the instructions provided. Section 3 talks about the application process constitutes a continuing application in accordance with Article 5. Tell the legislatures of at least 2/3 of the several states have made applications on the same subject. And Section 4 instructs the Secretary of State to transmit copies of this resolution to the appropriate parties.
I'm here live in Philadelphia at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. When you hear the phrase lives, fortunes, and sacred honor, these are the folks we should think of, those who anonymously gave their lives. Well, today you have a chance to volunteer. You need to volunteer for conventionofstates.com, the movement that's going to save the country. These folks are willing to step up and give everything. We need you to give just a little bit. Go to conventionofstates.com and volunteer today.